Kelly thought he had beaten the system, but the truth he tried to hide is finally coming to light. For over 20 years, one woman lived in the shadows, known only as Jane Doe, carrying the weight of a secret that shook the music world. Today, she has a name, Rona Landfair, and she's speaking out for the first time, revealing the chilling details behind the infamous tape, the grooming, and the years of silence forced upon her. The 2008 trial left millions confused, wondering how a man accused of such horrific crimes could walk free. But now, Rona explains why the system failed her, why the world didn't hear her voice, and how one of R&B's biggest icons manipulated not just her, but an entire community. This isn't just a story about a court verdict. It's about power, manipulation, and the courage it takes to reclaim your life after decades of abuse. And while some online are buzzing about new evidence, here's the truth: Kelly has not been released. The only thing that's new is the survivor finally telling her story. Stay tuned, because what Rona Landfair reveals will shock you, anger you, and make you question everything you thought you knew about one of music's most infamous scandals. This is the untold story behind Kelly's empire, the girl who lived it, and the evidence that finally changes the conversation. When most people think of Kelly, they picture sold-out concerts, Grammy Awards, and hits like I Believe I Can Fly or Ignition remix. But behind the music, behind the fame, was a story no one wanted to tell, the story of a young girl named Rona Landfair, who the world only knew for decades as Jane Doe. It all started in Chicago, the late 1990s, where Kelly was untouchable. He was more than just a star. He was a force in the Black Chicago music scene. Church performances, talent shows, recording studios, he was everywhere. And when Rona, a 13-year-old with dreams of singing, entered that orbit, it felt like fate. Her family had connections. Her Aunt Sparkle was an R&B singer who worked with Kelly, and suddenly, Rona was in the same room as one of music's biggest icons. What happened next was grooming in its most insidious form. Kelly knew exactly how to use ambition as leverage. He praised her talent, made her feel seen, offered special attention that no one else could provide. At first, it seemed harmless, even flattering. But that attention escalated. Alcohol, isolation, emotional manipulation, each step was calculated. Each moment seemed small, almost rational, but together they wove a web she couldn't see from the inside. By the time the infamous videotape was created, Rona was 14 years old. She had been quietly trapped in a system of abuse that Kelly had built over years, surrounded by people who either ignored the warning signs or rationalized them. The tape circulated publicly, humiliating her, but the world had no context. In court, she was Jane Doe. She couldn't testify. Fear had silenced her. The people around her, family, friends, even professionals, couldn't intervene. They were caught in the gravitational pull of Kelly's fame and influence. Then came 2002, when the Chicago Sun-Times received that anonymous package containing the videotape. The public had its first glimpse of what Kelly had done, or at least what it appeared he had done. Indictments followed, 21 counts of child pornography. Kelly was arrested in Miami and posted $750,000 bail. Headlines screamed, and the world watched a celebrity's life unravel, or so they thought. The trial was delayed, debated, dissected in the media. By 2008, the courtroom was packed with reporters, legal teams, and public spectators, all wondering how justice would be served. But when the moment came for Jane Doe to testify, to confirm that it was her in the tape, she could not. The reasons were complex: trauma, fear, shame, and the crushing weight of being only 14 when it happened. Without her confirmation, the prosecution's case collapsed. Kelly walked free. And for years, the case sat in that unresolved, uncomfortable space, a gap between what the law had done and what justice demanded. During those years, Rona lived in the shadows. She carried a name given to her by strangers, a story told about her without her voice. Every time Kelly released new music, every public appearance, every fan celebration reminded her of the abuse she had endured. And yet, even in silence, she began to prepare. She studied the legal system. She observed how survivors of abuse could eventually reclaim their narrative. And slowly, the girl who had been reduced to Jane Doe was ready to become Rona Landfair, a woman determined to tell her truth. The grooming process Kelly employed is worth understanding. Experts explain that predators don't act all at once, they escalate gradually. First, they find something the victim deeply wants: recognition, opportunity, admiration. Then, they create dependency, positioning themselves as the provider. Each small violation feels like a favor, each boundary crossed feels rationalized, until the victim is completely entangled. By the time abuse becomes overt, the young person is already trapped, emotionally, socially, and sometimes financially. This was Rona's reality. She didn't realize at first that what seemed like attention and mentorship was manipulation. She didn't know she was being given alcohol. She didn't know the recordings would circulate publicly. By the time she did, the damage was already done. And yet, her story wasn't over, it had only been paused, waiting for the right moment. Over the years, Kelly's empire continued. He toured. He recorded. He maintained a public image as a successful, untouchable R&B legend. Meanwhile, the pain he had caused simmered quietly, invisible to most. The 2008 trial was remembered not for justice, but for its gaps. The what-ifs and unanswered questions haunted journalists, prosecutors, and survivors alike. Why couldn't Jane Doe testify? What did Kelly's influence in the music world mean for justice? These questions were at the heart of a cultural reckoning about celebrity, power, and accountability. And then came the public revelations that finally shifted the narrative. Investigations, documentaries, and survivor testimonies began to expose the patterns of abuse Kelly had employed, how he isolated victims, coerced them into sexual acts, and maintained control over their lives. Most importantly, Rona began to speak. She wrote a book, gave interviews, and described in her own words the fear, manipulation, and silence that had defined her teenage years. Rona's voice clarified something essential. The 2008 trial didn't mean Kelly was innocent. It meant the system wasn't equipped to protect a 14-year-old girl whose abuser was one of the most influential figures in the music industry. And now, decades later, that voice is finally being heard. She reveals not only the acts themselves, but the full context: the grooming, the community denial, the family complications, and the long-lasting trauma. As viewers, we are confronted with more than a scandal. We are confronted with the human cost of fame and power. Rona Landfair is no longer Jane Doe. She has reclaimed her name, her story, and her narrative. And while Kelly remains imprisoned with a 31-year federal sentence, the true victory lies in the survivor finally stepping into the light, telling the story the world refused to hear for 2 decades. Her courage shows how abuse involving powerful people often remains hidden, not because it is unseen, but because the environment and influence around the perpetrator protect them. Only when survivors like Rona reclaim their voice does the full truth emerge. And this story, painful, shocking, and unflinching, is far from over. It is a reminder of why voices matter, why accountability matters, and why justice is not just a verdict, but a long, painful process that can take decades to achieve. Rona Landfair's voice was ready to be heard, and the world began to catch up. The federal trials that would finally hold Kelly accountable didn't start immediately. It took years of investigations, renewed attention, and survivor courage to build the cases that the public had long demanded. The first significant moment came in February 2019, when Cook County prosecutors charged Kelly with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse, spanning incidents between 1998 and 2010. These charges were separate from the earlier New York federal case, but together they began to paint a picture of a systematic pattern: a man using fame and influence to manipulate, coerce, and control underage girls and young women. By July 11, 2019, Kelly was arrested in Chicago on federal charges from the Eastern District of New York, including racketeering, trafficking, forced labor, child exploitation, and violations of the Mann Act. Bail was repeatedly denied because he was considered a flight risk. It was clear that the era of Kelly walking free, untouchable, was over. The first federal trial began on August 18, 2021, in Brooklyn, before U.S. District Judge N.M. Donnelly. The prosecution painted Kelly as the leader of a criminal enterprise spanning 25 years, a chilling revelation that connected individual instances of abuse across decades into a single coherent pattern. They argued that Kelly used his fame to lure minors into abusive relationships, some as young as 14, and to control them physically, emotionally, and socially. The trial's strategy centered on testimony from multiple survivors, including Jeranda Pace and 2 male accusers, who described being recruited and abused as teenagers. Staff members corroborated the rules imposed by Kelly: no eye contact with others, strict diets, constant availability, and absolute obedience. Every detail pointed to a methodical, systematic abuse, not isolated incidents, but a predatory network built on manipulation and fear. On September 27, 2021, after less than a day of deliberation, the jury convicted Kelly on all 9 counts in Brooklyn. The weight of decades-long abuse, finally acknowledged in a courtroom, sent a message to survivors everywhere: the system could work if given the right evidence and voices. But the saga didn't end there. Kelly faced a second federal trial in Chicago, starting August 15, 2022, alongside 2 former associates. This time, the charges involved producing child pornography, enticing minors, and obstruction of justice related to the 2008 trial. The woman at the center of the infamous videotapes, Jane Doe Rona Landfair, was finally ready to testify in detail. Her testimony was nothing short of earth-shattering. She described how Kelly groomed her starting at age 13, presenting himself as a mentor and godfather figure while systematically isolating her and coercing her into recruiting other young girls. Her account exposed the machinery behind Kelly's abuse, how he carefully controlled victims, manipulated their families, and created an environment where silence was the only perceived option. On September 14, 2022, the Chicago jury convicted Kelly on 6 of 13 counts, further cementing the narrative that Kelly was not merely a man who had made mistakes. He was a predator operating a long-running, calculated scheme. By February 23, 2023, U.S. District Judge Harry D. Linen-Weber sentenced him to 20 additional years, bringing the effective total to 31 years in federal prison. Throughout the trials, Rona's presence was pivotal. She was no longer Jane Doe. She had reclaimed her name, her identity, and her narrative. Her courage reshaped public understanding of the R. Kelly saga. The new evidence she provided, her memoir, interviews, and courtroom testimony, offered insight into why the 2008 trial collapsed, how grooming operates over time, and the emotional and social toll of prolonged abuse. Even after convictions, Kelly remained a figure of controversy, with some fans and supporters refusing to accept the outcomes. Rona faced death threats and harassment, a reminder that societal accountability often lags behind legal justice. Yet, she remained steadfast, using her voice to support other survivors and shine a light on predatory behavior. The trials also highlighted the challenges of prosecuting powerful public figures. Early cases had struggled due to the absence of key witnesses, lack of corroborating evidence, and the immense social and cultural influence Kelly held. But the cumulative impact of multiple survivor testimonies, investigative journalism, and public documentaries like Lifetime's Surviving R. Kelly created a momentum that could not be ignored. The Surviving R. Kelly series, aired in 2019, played a crucial role in shifting public consciousness. Survivors, speaking with full names and identities, described isolation, coercion, manipulation, and forced compliance, experiences that mirrored Rona's story. By seeing her experiences reflected in others, Rona found both validation and courage. The series reignited legal and public scrutiny, forcing prosecutors to pursue cases that had stalled for decades. Kelly's influence and status had long shielded him from consequences. His fame created a layer of public denial and industry complicity. Friends, family, and collaborators often rationalized what they saw, believing the celebrity myth over the survivor's reality. But by 2021, those barriers crumbled. Federal prosecutors framed the abuse as a criminal enterprise, demonstrating that Kelly's actions were systematic, deliberate, and orchestrated across decades and multiple states. The trials also exposed the emotional and psychological impact on victims. Testimonies revealed long-term trauma, isolation, and the burden of living publicly with experiences that should have remained private. Rona, by testifying, transformed her trauma into a weapon against systemic abuse. She became an advocate for truth, accountability, and survivor empowerment. Legally, the 31-year sentence serves as a historical marker. Kelly will not be released until 2045, at nearly 79 years old, a tangible consequence for a lifetime of abuse. All appeals have been denied, including by the U.S. Supreme Court, making the convictions effectively final. But beyond the sentence, the trials symbolize a broader cultural reckoning, the public and legal acknowledgement that fame and influence do not absolve responsibility, and that survivors' voices must be heard. Rona's story also reshapes the conversation about child exploitation, grooming, and systemic abuse in entertainment. It exposes patterns repeated in churches, sports, and industries where status shields predators. Experts emphasize that Kelly's case is not unique, but it is a clear example of how predatory behavior operates under layers of societal denial, celebrity influence, and legal gaps. Now, nearly 3 decades after the first allegations, Kelly's saga represents far more than a celebrity downfall. It is about power, silence, and survival. It is about a young girl, reduced to Jane Doe, reclaiming her identity as Rona Landfair. It is about a justice system finally catching up, and a culture grappling with the uncomfortable truth that many crimes remain hidden when they intersect with fame. Rona's courage is a beacon for survivors everywhere. By telling her story, she ensures that no one else can dismiss or diminish the experiences of the young, vulnerable, and silenced. Her book, Who's Watching? Shorty, captures her journey from victimhood to empowerment, chronicling the years of fear, manipulation, and eventual reclamation of her voice. And yet, the story reminds us justice is not only about verdicts or prison sentences. It's about acknowledging truth, providing support, and understanding the long-term impact of abuse. It's about survivors reclaiming their lives, identities, and agency. In Rona's case, that journey continues, and her voice reshapes history. By March 2026, the saga of R. Kelly had entered its final, defining chapter. After decades of allegations, trials, and media frenzy, Kelly remained housed at the Federal Correctional Institution, FCI, Butner Medium Wine in North Carolina, facing a projected release date of December 21, 2045. At nearly 79 years old, the man who once dominated R&B and pop culture with Grammy-winning hits like I Believe I Can Fly and Bump and Grind was now effectively removed from public life, confined not only by steel and walls, but by the weight of his own actions. Yet, even in prison, his story continued to evolve. In February 2026, Kelly was placed in special housing isolation after being investigated for allegedly possessing the phone number of a retired prison official. While this investigation was entirely separate from his original convictions, it fueled renewed attention online. Social media erupted, with users claiming new evidence leaked, though what they were actually referring to was Rona Landfair's public testimony and memoir, detailing what had happened decades earlier. This distinction matters. The new evidence wasn't a court filing or a secret document, it was a survivor finally speaking. For over 20 years, Rona had been Jane Doe, a ghost in one of the most infamous cases in modern music history. Now, she had reclaimed her name, her narrative, and her voice. Her book, Who's Watching? Shorty, alongside interviews, allowed the public to finally see the full picture of Kelly's grooming, manipulation, and systematic abuse. Rona's revelations revealed how the 2008 trial failed, not due to lack of evidence, but because she was not ready to testify. Fear, shame, and the calculated manipulation by Kelly's team kept her silent at the time. She was only 14 years old when the tape was recorded, and by the time the trial came, the environment around her, family connections, industry pressures, and societal disbelief made speaking out impossible. That silence, now broken, reframed the narrative for the world. Kelly's incarceration represents more than punishment. It is a symbol of accountability. His 31-year federal sentence, 30 years in New York plus 20 years in Chicago, served concurrently, reflects a legal system finally able to navigate the complexities of prosecuting a high-profile abuser. Legal experts agree that the convictions are effectively final, with all appeals denied, including by the U.S. Supreme Court. But the story isn't only about justice served. It's about the human cost. Survivors like Rona have spent decades carrying trauma, shame, and public scrutiny. Even after the trials, they face threats, harassment, and social backlash. In 2026, Rona revealed that she had received death threats from Kelly supporters. This ongoing danger underscores a painful truth. The legal system can convict, but society's reckoning is ongoing. The cultural impact of her testimony and book cannot be overstated. For years, public perception of the R. Kelly story was filtered through documentaries, media narratives, and speculation. Surviving R. Kelly in 2019 exposed the structural abuse, showing viewers how Kelly controlled, isolated, and exploited multiple victims. But Rona's voice added personal specificity. She explained, step by step, how grooming works, how fame and perceived opportunity mask abuse, how emotional and financial dependency is created, and how silence is enforced through fear. Experts note that grooming patterns in high-profile abuse cases are often gradual, incremental, and emotionally manipulative. Each act appears small or rationalizable until the victim is deeply trapped. Rona's testimony illuminated that process. Kelly's attentions were framed as mentorship, gifts, or opportunity. Over time, these interactions escalated into abuse, coercion, and exploitation, leaving the victims socially isolated and psychologically constrained. Her story also challenges cultural narratives about celebrity accountability. For decades, Kelly's music, status, and fan base insulated him. Even as allegations circulated, many in the public rationalized or ignored the claims. Now, the combination of survivor testimony, legal action, and investigative reporting has eroded that shield, proving that fame does not exempt one from justice. Beyond legal and cultural impacts, Rona's journey represents empowerment and reclamation. By publicly naming herself and narrating her story, she has shifted from being a passive victim to an active advocate. She channels her experiences into supporting other survivors, raising awareness about grooming tactics and challenging systems that fail young people. Her courage encourages others who may have been silenced to speak out. Kelly's current life in federal prison is a stark contrast to his former fame. No concerts, no hit records, no awards. Just consequence, confinement, and reflection. Prison does not erase the impact of his crimes, but it represents society's final judgment, a clear statement that exploitation, manipulation, and abuse have real-world consequences, no matter how high-profile the perpetrator. Looking forward, the story of Rona and R. Kelly resonates beyond their individual experiences. It forces a confrontation with systemic issues, celebrity privilege, how fame and money can shield individuals from accountability for decades. Survivor silence, how fear, manipulation, and societal pressures prevent victims from speaking out. Legal complexity, how difficult it is to prosecute powerful figures when key witnesses are silenced or intimidated. Cultural reckoning, how society gradually learns to distinguish between celebrating talent and ignoring misconduct. Rona's choice to tell her story also emphasizes a vital truth. Survivor voices matter more than media speculation or public rumor. The new evidence people discussed in 2026 was not a shocking document or secret file. It was the survivor speaking, with clarity and courage, about what happened, why the system initially failed, and how abuse operates. Even though R. Kelly remains in prison and legal avenues are closed, the story's human and cultural consequences are ongoing. Rona's narrative and those of other survivors continues to influence conversations about child protection, grooming awareness, and entertainment industry accountability. Her courage ensures that the public cannot reduce her to a Jane Doe or a footnote in a scandal. She is now Rona Landfair, a person whose experience reshapes understanding and inspires change. Ultimately, Kelly's saga is about more than music, fame, or scandal. It's about power, abuse, resilience, and accountability. It is a cautionary tale about how influence can be weaponized and how courage and persistence can eventually bring truth to light. While the legal chapter may be closed, the cultural, societal, and personal chapters continue to unfold, demonstrating that justice is both a legal and human journey. As we close this series, remember, the case of R. Kelly is a testament to the enduring strength of survivors, the long arc of justice, and the necessity of listening to those who have been silenced for too long. Rona Landfair, once Jane Doe, now stands as a symbol of reclamation and a reminder that truth may take decades to emerge, but when it does, it cannot be ignored.